Good evening, this is the Oscar Expert here with Brother Bro, and it's time to review A Different Man, directed by Aaron Schimberg. This is about a man with a facial deformity who undergoes surgery that makes him look like Sebastian Stan. He abandons his old identity and reconnects with a friend who's making a play about him, the old him, played by Renata Reinsve. The movie's a dark comedy. Many have compared it to, like, Charlie Kaufman, in terms of, like, the psychological comedy here, or even the Coen brothers in how
it feels like the world's playing like a cosmic joke on the protagonist.
I also was reminded of Dream Scenario in terms of a comedy that is very well stylized, feels a little bit mind-bendy, and has some interesting layers to it. And I'm liking these movies.
Sebastian Stan here gives one of his best performances, and he's really interesting to cast as a sort of generically handsome looking guy who seems like at once so ordinary that you might pass him by on the street, but also like is a handsome man. I think it was kind of like the perfect way to cast this character.
He plays the character's crippling social anxieties really well. Even when he's covered in makeup, the body language is really strong. And who he is after the makeup is removed fits and makes a lot of sense with the way that he's playing, you know, his face.
Renata Reinsve is also in this, and I was surprised to find that she's really a lead in this. Like, she's in the whole film. She has a lot of great scenes here, and she was just excellent. The two of them have a really interesting kind of chemistry going on, or maybe even anti-chemistry in certain scenes.
Yeah, I think one of the more interesting elements of the movie is the ambiguities of this character and how much her kindness towards these people with disabilities is sheer kindness and how much of it is a little like maybe predatory or wanting ownership of it. And I feel like there's a lot of questions that are very open-ended about who she is to the audience, and people might feel different ways about it. And Adam Pearson is a standout in a supporting role in this film who comes in later and has a similar facial deformity to Sebastian Stan, but with all the charisma that he could never hope to have. And the way that he plays this character is surprising and funny.
This film is chock full of dark comedy where you kind of feel like you're laughing at the protagonist's misery. And the further into the movie that you fall, the more you feel like the character kind of deserves you to laugh at him or deserves to be like ridiculed or mocked a little bit. And when this movie does present you with a twist, it really pays off. Like, the twist shifts the dynamics of the film in interesting ways, and how the characters approach one another and how they're like now going to reconfigure themselves to get to their goal.
The twist really challenged the main character in a very deeply psychological way, where once the character had his Sebastian Stan transformation, I was like, where else can this movie go? And it finds ways to go inward.
Yeah, it's very psychologically unnerving. You know, it very much asks you to examine your own ego and the why you tell yourself that you have certain limitations, or, oh, I can't do this because of this. And when the character is sort of like sledgehammered with the fact of his own limitations, it's a fascinating breaking point for him. And from that point on, it feels like he's just falling down a very, very long staircase.
Maybe a little too long. Maybe a little, like
yeah, I think that it was a little bit over-extracted. Like, the twists sort of come and you're like, oh my gosh, that's really interesting. And then it kind of happens over and over, and you see just a continual reinforcing of like where this movie is going, and you're like, yep, it is going that direction.
The movie also has kind of an interesting meta angle that comments on its own casting of Sebastian Stan as somebody with a facial deformity, and
all the meta commentary here is like really strong. All of the satire is just excellent.
I also think it's well stylized. There are a lot of shots that hold in one place that are very strong and
very well stylized. Very good looking movie. Excellent use of color.
Sound was strong in certain scenes,
and the production design was super interesting. Like, it never felt like it was locked into a modern time period, even though I don't think this is a period film. I can't really decide whether it is or not.
The score was also really good. It reminded me of
the score was
Being John Malkovich. I think they wanted to go for a Being John Malkovich type score, but you know what? They kind of
It also kind of reminded me of the score for May December. Whenever the theme comes in, it's very much announcing itself and its presence. It's kind of an imposing force onto the film.
I think there are a lot of interesting layers to this movie.
It's sort of amalgamating a bunch of ideas about how we see ourselves and our own beauty, and how our ego intersects with that, and then how like media portrays beauty standards, and like how we internalize that. Like, all that stuff's at play here. You know, I would say subjectively, I don't really come away with a particular thing. And maybe part of that is just because we have a film that is very much looking down at its protagonist, and that kind of comes along with, you know, not being like emotionally affected for me by a film. But, you know, this film is really strong. A24 fans in general are really going to love this.
Yeah, I think Adam Schimberg has a very strong voice here as a comedic filmmaker. I really like how awkward and dry some of the comedy is here. You know, again, it reminds me of like Christoph Borgli with Dream Scenario, or maybe even slightly like a Ruben Östlund. I like the way that you kind of search and find the humor for yourself.
Oscar talk, does this get makeup?
Oh, right, yeah.
I really don't know.
Maybe it's like Pearl, where it's like, well, that had a lot of makeup, but then they just don't shortlist it. Like, I think if I got shortlisted, I would probably predict it. That's definitely possible.
Because it's not going to be an awards conversation movie.
Nope.
So, and I don't even think it's going to come out during awards season. I'd be surprised if they put it there. So it'd be the kind of film where like a shortlist could revive it. I'll give this film an 8 out of 10.
Another one of the strongest films from Sundance for me. I would give it an 8 out of 10. Thank you for watching. Thank you for subscribing.
Do you wish that you could take a pill to look like Sebastian Stan?